Our first speaker this afternoon is Lambert Meertens, one of the giants of Dutch informatics. He's been here more or less right from the start. He worked on the first Dutch computer, as he will shortly say. He worked on Algol 68, and if there's one person in this world that we have to thank for Python, apart of course from Guido van Rossum, who did the work, it's Lambert's doing, because it was actually spun off from a project that he started when he was a researcher here at the CWI. Guido van Rossum worked with us and then went off and took the ideas that we developed in that research project and turned it into Python. Lambert has been a professor at Utrecht and a researcher at a research institute in America, and I'm very pleased to say that he's now going to tell us about a very early project, which was actually very exciting, how he composed music, classical music, using declarative techniques, and this is back in the 60s. Anyway, please welcome Lambert Meertens.
Okay. We live in 1962, and Kees Koster, who some of you may know, and myself are students at the Municipal University of Amsterdam, as it was then still called the Gemeente-Universiteit de GU. And we were supposed to follow all kinds of courses like analysis, algebra, geometry, but we thought they were boring. So instead of doing that, we attended graduate lectures and seminars, which were more interesting. And one of those things we attended was very exciting. We thought the seminar Machine and Language, sponsored by Euratom of all possible things. And one thing we were introduced to there was Chomsky's book, Syntactic Structures. Now, in this book, Chomsky defines a series of grammars with the aim of understanding natural language. So he has a family of grammar formalisms, which get more and more complicated until transformative grammars, transformational grammars. But the first approach are context-free grammars. And the people in the seminar were mostly logicians and linguists, and to them this was something new, that you could describe language with a formal grammar this way. But Kees and I were actually familiar with this kind of grammar because it was the type of grammar that had been used in the Algol 60 report to define the language. So here is how Chomsky's formalism. This is an example from his book. There's a set of rules, production rules. On the left-hand side of the arrows, you have so-called non-terminal symbols. On the right-hand side, you have either non-terminal symbols or terminal symbols. And in his example, the non-terminals can be recognized because they start with the capital letter, and the terminal symbols are all in lowercase. The man, ball, hit, took, etc. is not part of the formalism. It just encourages you to use your imagination. In the Algol 60 report, this is from the Algol 60 report, except I've shuffled the parts because it's kind of conventional to start top down. What is a sentence? It is an NP followed by a VP. NP is a noun phrase, is an abbreviation, and VP is a verb phrase. And a noun phrase is T, which is just the, and a noun. So this is a very limited grammar for English. And a verb phrase is a verb followed by a noun phrase. So you get sentences like the man hit the ball. In the Alco 6 rate report, it goes bottom up, but I've reshuffled it to make it top down, so we can see what an assignment statement is. It is defined as being either a left part list followed by an arithmetic expression, or a left part list followed by a Boolean expression. And this is formally equivalent to Chomsky's grammar, even though the notation is different. The non-terminals are indicated by putting them between those angled brackets. Instead of an arrow, we use colon, equals. And terminal symbols, and there's only one here. This colon equal is the only terminal symbol in this whole part of the grammar. Is written as is. Okay. Now, back to 1962. We were attending the seminar, and it was common, of course, that the students at the seminar were supposed to give presentations there, which would give them points. And even though we were not graduate students, we wouldn't get any points. We thought, let's also give a presentation. And instead of making it theoretical, we thought, let's make it more practical. Let's give a demo of how this type of grammar can be used actually to not only analyze but generate language, which was part of Chomsky's program, because his idea was we internally have those grammars and use them to produce our sentences. So we say, yes, okay, we'll give a demo. And we had the division of labor. Case was to write the program using the Electrologica X1 of the Mathematical Center, now CWI, and immediate neighbor here. And my role in the division of labor is to come up with a grammar, and not just something like the man hit the ball, but really non-trivial English sentences. So there I am. Now, to turn a grammar into a generator, we had to do a bit tricky work. Let me here use a very simple example, and I use a mixture of the notation of Chomsky and the Alco 6 report. I keep the arrows, but instead of using commas, I use vertical bars for the alternatives. So a sentence is a noun phrase followed by R, followed by a color. And noun phrases here are roses, violets, or lemons, and color is red, blue, or yellow. So you can make beautiful poems composed from a sequence of sentences. Roses are red, violets are blue, lemons are yellow, and so are you. The last part is not produced by the grammar. But also, of course, lemons are blue, violets are red, and roses are yellow. So the last is possible, but the others are lies. So here is turning this grammar into a generator. That's just a simple transformation. Define the procedure send, which first calls a procedure NP, then prints R. Printing, it means I have a terminal symbol, and then calls for a color. And if these things are defined, the NP and color are very similar, so I give only one of the two, the definition of color. Now, to make it generative, we now have to make a random choice between the three possibilities, red, blue, and yellow, and then print that. And so if you repeatedly call send, and NP is defined analogously, then you will get these sentences I said and more. Now, so that problem is solved, so to speak, but now I have to actually make a grammar, and not only for lemons that are blue. Here's a very first attempt, very similar to the very simple example grammar of Chomsky. A sentence is a noun phrase followed by a verb, or a noun phrase followed by a verb, followed by a noun phrase. So noun phrases are the boy or mice and grains, and verb can be false or like. So with this grammar, we produce a sentence like the boy falls and mice like grains. Both are true. No, maybe the boy did not fall, but mice like grains. Well, this looks fine, but there are some problems, because the grammar also produces the boy like mice, and mice falls, and that's not grammatical. What's the problem? The problem is that in English, the number of the subject and the verb should agree. And in the first one, the boy is singular, but the verb is plural, and in the second, the noun is plural, but the verb is singular. So I needed to fix this. So here's the second attempt. And the trick is to split the non-terminal into singular noun phrases and plural noun phrases. So I have two non-terminals, similarly for the verbs. But now I have to say it's singular noun phrase followed by a singular verb, or a plural noun phrase followed by a plural verb, or for the other two, singular verb, noun phrase, singular verb, and a singular noun phrase, but the object can be either. So I get also a plural noun phrase there. So my former thing has now blown up into 6 different alternatives. And so but I still have a problem, because this grammar now produces grains like, and there's an agreement between the subject and the verb, but still it's not a grammatical sentence. And mice falls the boy, mice, and there should have been fall, sorry, or mice fall the boy. They fail transitivity argument. If you look like, use like, then you need something here, a complement. If you say false, then you can't have an object. So English grammar and many natural languages have a notion of agreement. I already mentioned the number agreement between subject and verb, but there's also this transitivity agreement, a person agreement between subject and verb. I see them, they see me. So if you switch the object and the subject in that sentence, the forms I becomes me and they becomes them. And there's also the case agreement. The pronoun has to agree in the case with the role in the grammar. So, okay, that was this example I just gave. Person agreement is I am, you are, he is. Am, are, is. So that all these things need to be taken account of in a good grammar. And by repeating this trick here of splitting the non-terminals, you get more and more rules with multiple copies and multiple copies of multiple copies and multiple copies of multiple copies of multiple copies. And these are not only the only agreements that you have to take account of. So it gives a combinatorial explosion. So I have a problem now, or I actually have 3 problems. The first was that I could see that I was not going to finish in time by blowing up the grammar like this. And even if I did manage to do it by working day and night, then we would have no time to debug the bloated grammar, because inevitably there would be errors in there. And there was a third problem, which I thought was the worst, that producing such an expanded grammar was going to be boring. Oops, what to do? And instead of writing, I sat thinking, or I paced around, and then I had an idea, let the computer do the work. Why should I do this? It's a boring job. If it's a boring job, a computer should be able to do it. So my idea is, let's use a shorthand notation. I say a sentence is a noun phrase, and this stands for two non-terminals, this stands for two non-terminals, and this also for two non-terminals. And then I have an affix rule that tells me what those subscripts here can become. And if I write this down, then I could write a program to expand this into this full form and keep repeating that for all these affixes, singular, plural, and object, subject, whatever, that indicate the agreement between parts of a phrase. So I thought it was a very good idea, but the problem is still not solved. The deadline was approaching quickly, and you have to imagine 1962, Algol 60 was a language for numerical programming, not for, there was no decent input or output of characters and things like that, and even if you could input them, you could not do much with them. So we were not going to, or I was not going to write and debug a program for expanding the grammar. Moreover, if I had had the time, it would still have been futile, because then we still had this tremendous bloated grammar, which you would have to transcribe into a generator. And that would also be terrible work. And Kees was going to do that. I could not possibly push that on to him. And then I had another idea, why don't we just fuse the expansion with the generation, just in one go. So instead of saying this is shorthand for more rules, it's just a new type of grammar, a grammar that has two levels. We should write generators for two-level grammars. And that's how affix grammars were born, out of necessity. And it seemed to work. Okay, 1962, fast forward. Oh no, first, something more about affix grammars. There are two levels of rules, but you will have understood all of that. One level, the top level, are the affix rules, which you saw, and in fact, they are themselves a grammar, those rules. They generate a language of affixes, and then at the ground level, you have rules that look like normal CFG rules, but there are non-terminal affixes in those rules, and you turn them into normal rules by replacing those non-terminal affixes by the terminal affixes created at the second level. And you have to do that systematic or consistently. If you have an N in one non-terminal, you should use the same substitution in another non-terminal, either both SG or both PL. And if there are different roles, then you can indicate it like with an accent like N prime I had in one example. Okay, fast forward to 1967, and you see here May 1967. There appeared something in Computers and Automation, an announcement for a computer-composed music competition. And I'm not going to read all the rules to you, because there's much more to this. This would fill several screens. But here is a part of the rule that is relevant. Entries may be submitted in any of the following forms. A score for a string quartet. B, a recording accompanied by a score when other instruments are involved. Or C, a recording without a score if the sound is produced by a computer or something without instruments being involved. Now you see here May 1967, but in reality I only saw this in the Christmas break. I'm a kind of a workaholic when it comes to computer, and I spent the Christmas break while everyone was breaking. I spent it at CWR in the library reading up, and I opened Computers and Automation from May 1967. I saw this. And then I also saw that the deadline was 31st of January 1968. And so I thought, gee, I wish I had seen this earlier because it seemed fun to me, but there's no way I was going to do this. Impossible. But then I thought, why not? Let me give it a try. So what I did is I went to the music library when it opened again in the new year, checked out all the books I could find and could borrow on string quartets, because I'd never done anything with string quartets except listening to them, and tried to understand what was going on. Now, what I had done before was using affix grammars to generate music. I realized at some point that a lot of the repetitive patterns you saw either in music or in other things, Lindenmayer systems, that they could be described by affix grammars. And here's an example of how you can generate a rhythm. I directly write it procedurally, but this rhythm non-terminal has one affix, the duration, and you need to make a random decision, just like for the colors. You need to decide whether you are going to break up this duration into two parts or not. And if it's unbroken, then you produce a tick that will use for that duration, and otherwise you kind of halve the duration. It can also be you take 1/3 or whatever. In any case, break it up, and you produce two ticks. Oh, sorry, this should have been rhythm. This is where you see tick here, should have been rhythm. These should be recursive calls. And so it can be, but it can go. That's the kind of rhythm that can be produced, and faster, but I'm not so fast, so I keep it at this. I had experimented with such things and adding also a melody to the rhythm. The idea is that if a melody rises, it increases tension, and when it goes down, the tension ebbs away. And to make a piece of music interesting, you can't have tension all the time. You need to make it ebb away, and you can't have ebbed away all the time. You need to increase tension. So I thought, well, if you split something in two parts, then it's trivial if they have the same tension, so they should be a bit different, and the high point of the melody represents the tension. So if it's unbroken, you produce a tone of that height and the duration, and otherwise you decide randomly whether it should be ascending or descending. And in one case, you ascend from height -1 to height, or you go from height to height -1 when it descends, and the rhythms are the same as before. So I had used this to produce melodies, and they were singable. They sounded interesting enough, and so I thought I can use this as a basis. So I was sitting in a library looking at scores and things like that. I found all kinds of things, regularities, and I added them as parameters and added them more and more and more. And at some point I had something that I thought should produce something, but then I ran it and I got a fatal error message. I fixed it, I ran again, fatal error message, etc., until one day, late in January, I suddenly got the printout without an error message, which was this thick. And it was in the middle of the night. I waited till the post office opened. I posted it there, express, and registered, and it cost me a fortune, but it reached London. And then I was waiting and waiting, and let me show here something of the program. So I called it compose for the whole thing, and the two affixes you saw before blew up to in total 17 affixes, much of which is due to the fact that 4 voices had to be produced in general, together. A string quartet has 4 voices, but they depend on each other, and so that made the whole thing, especially since they don't tick at the same time. They have different rhythms, the different voices, but sometimes they play together, sometimes not, etc. That made it all very complicated to do this, and that gave all these things. And the whole program was about 1,000 lines, so you will forgive me not showing everything and certainly not explaining everything, because I would have a hard time understanding why I did things the way I did. But all of it is basically just juggling with the affixes, except for one thing, which I did in a non-declarative way, that is the treatment of harmony. So let me not go into details on that. In any case, I got a message back from the jury saying, this printout is beautiful, but we can't read it. Please submit a decent score. So I bought a number of sheets of paper, and I used my best penmanship to produce this, sent it back, and then they said, okay, we will perform this at the festival. And I got the special mention of the jury. Okay, that was it. I think there is a video of that Stephen shot of an performance of this string quartet. Maybe we can hear some of that. Then you will have an idea also how it sounds. In the meantime, I can, while that starts up, I can maybe see, you can see here in the melody that it goes up and down, and if in a phrase like this, the highest note here is higher than here, and so on. Oh, okay. Then, okay, fine.